Cross the bloodline and you're dead. The sentinel's growl reverberates through the frozen ravine, but Iris barely registers it. She's too focused on the wall of silver-furred warriors blocking the mountain pass. 12 feet of corded muscle and winter-hardened rage. Eyes like shards of black ice fixed on her broken form. The Bloods now packs legendary border guard. The same wolves who slaughtered an entire military battalion 3 winters ago now stand between her and the only creature who can give her what she needs. Behind her, Marcus Thornfield's voice carries on the howling wind. Look at her crawl. Did you really think you could walk into Varric's domain wearing those rags? That you could demand an audience like you're somebody? Iris's bare feet, they'd taken her boots when they burned her home, are bleeding against the jagged ice. The tattered cloak she'd salvaged from her sister's corpse is threadbare, yes, but it's all she has left of Alara. Now she sees the ash stains near the hem, still dark with soot. Of course. Her entire life is ash now. Of course her one attempt to reclaim something, to make them pay, to find someone strong enough to crush the men who took everything would end like this. Please, she rasps, not to Marcus or the sentinels, but to the largest wolf, the one with scars crossing its muzzle like war paint. Its lips peel back, revealing fangs the length of daggers. I know what it's like. The wolf's ears snap forward. I said no speaking, the sentinel snarls, raising a spear tipped with silver that glows with ancient runes. But Iris can't stop now. She's going to die anyway, either from the spear, the wolves, or the frostbite that's already turning her fingers black. At least this way, she chooses her final words. Empty. She breathes, meeting those obsidian eyes. You're empty inside. Just like me. The massive wolf sits. The entire ravine goes silent. Marcus's triumphant sneer freezes on his face like a death mask. The sentinel's spear lowers slowly, confusion rippling through the pack bond that even Iris can feel crackling in the air. And the wolf, the legendary border alpha, Varric's personal executioner, presses its enormous muzzle against Iris's trembling, blood-stained hand. Impossible, someone whispers from the pack. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, heavy, crunch through the snow from the mouth of the ice-carved den. Every wolf in the ravine immediately drops to their bellies, heads bowed so low their snouts touch the frozen ground. Every wolf except the one touching Iris, and Iris herself, who doesn't understand what's happening until she sees him. Varric Bloods now emerges from the shadows, and Iris's breath crystallizes in her throat. She's heard the stories, whispered by refugees, screamed by dying soldiers, sung by bards who'd never seen him and lived. But nothing prepared her for the reality of him. Massive, easily 7 feet of raw, brutal power, with shoulders that strain against the black fur cloak draped across them like a conqueror's mantle. His hair is white as fresh snow, wild and unbound, framing a face that looks carved from mountain stone by something ancient and merciless. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw shadowed with stubble and scars, gods, his scars. They cut across his bronze skin like a map of every battle he's survived. But his eyes are obsidian, actual black, bottomless and gleaming in the pale winter light as they focus on her with an intensity that makes her lungs forget how to function. Alpha. Marcus's voice cracks now, all his earlier mockery replaced with stammering terror. This vagrant trespassed onto sacred ground. She claims she deserves an audience with you. I was just about to have her executed. Silence. His voice is deep, quiet, and absolute, like the moment before an avalanche. Like death itself speaking. Marcus's mouth snaps shut with an audible click of teeth. Varric moves closer. Each step purposeful, predatory, the crunch of ice beneath his boots the only sound in the frozen world. He doesn't look at his sentinels or Marcus or anyone else. He only looks at her. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Chapter 1. The silence that followed the cub's submission was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Iris remained frozen on her knees, her heart hammering against her ribs as the massive silver wolf before her slowly shifted. Bones cracked and reformed, for reseeding into bronze skin, until Alpha Werewolf stood before her in his human form, 7 feet of corded muscle and barely restrained violence. His eyes, still that inhuman amber, burned into her with an intensity that made her want to crawl out of her own skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. "What are you?" Iris opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat had gone desert dry. Behind Werewolf, the cub, still in his wolf form, pressed himself against the alpha's leg, whining softly. The sound was almost protective. Werewolf's gaze never left her face as he reached down, his hand resting on the cub's head. No shifter should have been able to do what you just did. No human either. So I'll ask you again, little rabbit. He took a step closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. What? Are you? I don't know, Iris stammered, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I'm just human. I swear. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Calm a feral cub with a touch? Make my beta's son submit when nothing else could. His laugh was sharp, humorless. That doesn't happen by accident. Before she could respond, his hand shot out and closed around her upper arm. His grip wasn't bruising, but it was inescapable, iron wrapped in velvet. He hauled her to her feet with effortless strength, and she stumbled against him, her legs still shaking from adrenaline and fear. "You're coming with me," he said, already pulling her away from the border. "You cross into Blood Moon territory, stinking of desperation and running from something, and then you do the impossible with my cub. I think you and I need to have a longer conversation." "Wait, please." Iris tried to dig her heels in, but it was like trying to stop a freight train with her bare hands. He simply kept walking, dragging her along as the forest blurred past. The cub trotted beside them, occasionally glancing up at her with those luminous eyes. The den appeared through the trees like something out of a fever dream, a sprawling compound of timber and stone that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside itself. Other wolves watched their approach, some in human form, others as beasts, their eyes following her with predatory interest. Iris's pulse spiked again. She'd heard stories about what happened to humans who stumbled into shifter territory. None of them ended well. Werewolf led her through the compound to a large building at its heart, the Alpha's den, she realized with growing dread. Inside, he finally released her, gesturing sharply to a chair near the massive stone fireplace. "Sit." She sat. The cub immediately padded over and lay down at her feet, his head resting on his paws as he watched his alpha with wary devotion. Werewolf paced in front of the fire, his movements restless, dangerous. "Name?" "Iris Fallon." "What were you running from?" Her hands twisted in her lap. How much should she tell him? How much could she afford not to? "My pack. My father. He's the alpha of Shadowfen." Her voice cracked. "He killed my mother. And I'm next." Something flickered in Werewolf's expression, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He stopped pacing, studying her with renewed intensity. "Thaddeus Fallon is your father?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "And he wants you dead." Another nod. Werewolf was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the cub at her feet. When he looked back at her, there was calculation in his eyes, the cold arithmetic of an alpha weighing costs and benefits. "You calmed him," he said simply. "My nephew. He's been feral for 3 months. Attacked 6 of my wolves, killed 2 humans who got too close. Nothing and no one could reach him." He gestured to where the cub lay peacefully, his breathing slow and steady. "Until you." Iris followed his gaze, her heart squeezing at the sight of the small wolf. "I don't understand it either." "I don't need you to understand it." Varek moved closer, and she fought the urge to shrink back. I need you to do it again. Stay here, in my territory. Work with the cub as his tamer. Help me bring him back. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something almost gentle. In exchange, I'll give you sanctuary. Protection. Your father won't touch you here. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Iris looked down at the cub, at his peaceful face, and felt something twist in her chest. She thought of her mother's blood on the stone floor, of her father's cold eyes, of the endless running that awaited her if she refused. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. Varek's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, if smiles could hold that much danger. Good. Welcome to Blood Moon, little rabbit. Chapter 2. The cabin sat at the edge of the compound, half hidden by towering pines and close enough to the cub's enclosure that Iris could hear him moving in the night. It was small but sturdy, rough-hewn timber walls, a stone hearth, a single room with a bed that looked like it could sleep 3 grown men. Everything smelled of wolf and wilderness, a scent so thick she could taste it on her tongue. Varek had deposited her there with minimal ceremony, gesturing to the supplies stacked near the door. Food. Blankets. Everything you'll need. The cub's pen is through those trees, 50 yards north. His amber eyes had held hers for a beat too long. Don't make me regret this, little rabbit. Then he'd left, and Iris had been alone with the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest like a stone. She didn't stay alone for long. The door slammed open without warning, and a woman stalked inside, tall and willowy, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of winter ice. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who knew exactly how dangerous she was, and when she spoke, her voice dripped with venom. So, you're the human. Iris straightened from where she'd been unpacking, her pulse already racing. The woman's hostility was palpable, a living thing that filled the small cabin like smoke. My name is Iris. I don't care what your name is. The woman circled her slowly, predatory, assessing. I'm Seraphina. The Alpha's intended. And I want you to understand something very clearly. She stopped directly in front of Iris, close enough that Iris could see the gold flecks in her pale eyes. You don't belong here. You're not Pack. You're not even a proper shifter, just some pathetic little stray the Alpha took pity on. I'm here to help the cub, Iris said quietly, forcing herself not to step back. Seraphina's laugh was cruel, crystalline. Help? That thing is beyond help. 3 months of the best tamers in the territory have tried and failed. But sure, let the human with no training, no rank, no value try her hand. I'm sure that will end wonderfully. She leaned in, her breath hot against Iris's ear. When you fail, and you will fail, the Alpha will see you for what you really are. A liability. And liabilities don't last long in Blood Moon. The threat hung in the air between them, sharp as a blade. Before Iris could respond, Seraphina pulled back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sweet dreams, little human. Try not to get yourself killed. Then she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her with a resounding crack. Iris stood frozen for a long moment, her heart hammering, hands shaking. She'd known coming here would be dangerous. She just hadn't expected the danger to be quite so immediate, quite so personal. But Seraphina's words had done something unexpected. They'd kindled a small, stubborn ember of defiance in her chest. She wasn't going to fail. She couldn't afford to. The cub's enclosure was exactly where Varek had said it would be, a large clearing surrounded by reinforced fencing that looked like it could hold back a hurricane. In the center, a crude shelter had been built, and from within came the sound of restless movement, claws scraping against wood. Iris approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the needle-strewn ground. Hey, she called out gently. It's me. From earlier. Remember? For a moment, there was only silence. Then a pair of luminous eyes appeared in the shadows of the shelter, watching her with that same wary intelligence she'd seen at the border. The cub emerged slowly, his silver-gray fur catching the moonlight, and Iris's breath caught at the sight of him. He looked broken. Not physically, his body was strong, well-fed despite his feral state, but there was something in his eyes that made her chest ache. A deep, primal pain that went beyond words or reason. The kind of pain that came from losing something fundamental, something that couldn't be replaced. "I know," she whispered, sinking down to sit cross-legged just outside the fence. "I know what it feels like. To lose everything." The cub tilted his head, studying her. Then, to her surprise, he padded closer until he was right at the fence line, separated from her by only a few inches of space and iron. Up close, she could see the scars hidden beneath his fur, claw marks, bite wounds, evidence of the violence that had marked his short life. Slowly, carefully, Iris reached through the fence. The cub didn't move, didn't retreat. Her fingers brushed his muzzle, and she felt that same strange pull as before, that inexplicable connection that made no sense, but felt more real than anything she'd ever known. "Your pack," she said softly, the understanding hitting her like a physical blow. "You lost your pack, didn't you? Your parents. Your family." The cub's eyes squeezed shut, and a low whine built in his throat, not aggressive, but grieving. It was the sound of a soul in mourning, and Iris felt tears prick her own eyes in response. "Me too," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I lost my mother. And my father. He's the reason I'm here. Running. Hiding." She stroked the soft fur between his ears, and the cub leaned into her touch, trembling. "But maybe that's why I can reach you. Because I understand. Because we're both broken." They stayed like that for a long time, the feral cub and the runaway daughter, two lost souls finding unexpected solace in each other's pain. And as the moon climbed higher overhead, Iris made a silent promise to the small creature before her. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, she would help him heal. Even if it meant facing down every wolf in Blood Moon who wanted her gone. Chapter 3. The summons came 3 days after Iris's arrival, delivered by a gruff beta who looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. "Alpha wants you in his study. Now." Iris's stomach twisted as she followed him through the compound, past wolves who stopped their conversations to stare, their eyes tracking her movement with unnerving focus. The Alpha's study was in the main den, up a flight of stone stairs that seemed to climb forever. When the beta finally pushed open the heavy oak door, Iris stepped into a room that stole her breath. Maps covered every surface, walls, desk, even portions of the floor. Red markers indicated threats, blue showed allied territories, and black marked the dead zones. Places where packs had been once. Werewolf stood before the largest map, his back to her, one hand braced against the wall as he studied the encroaching darkness. "Close the door," he said without turning. She did, the click of the latch unnaturally loud in the silence. Werewolf finally turned to face her, and Iris was struck by how exhausted he looked. The firelight cast harsh shadows across his features, emphasizing the tight lines around his mouth, the tension in his jaw. "Can you read?" The question surprised her. "Yes. My mother taught me." Something flickered in his expression, approval, maybe, or simply acknowledgement. He gestured to the desk, where stacks of reports teetered in precarious piles. "Good. I need someone to organize these. Territory sightings, patrol reports, anything related to rogue pack movements. Sort them by date and location." His amber eyes held hers. "Can you do that?" "Of course, but why me?" "Because everyone else is busy keeping us alive," he said bluntly. "And because you're here, under my protection, eating my food and using my resources. You want to earn your keep beyond playing with a cub? Start here." It wasn't a request. Iris moved to the desk and began sorting through the chaos, her fingers quickly falling into rhythm. The reports were grim reading: villages razed, travelers gone missing, entire border patrols found torn apart with a savagery that made her stomach churn. The rogue pack wasn't just a threat. It was a plague, spreading across the territories like wildfire. "They're getting closer," she said quietly, holding up a report dated just 5 days ago. "This sighting was only 20 miles from your border." Verek's jaw tightened. "I know." He moved to stand beside her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smell the pine and smoke that clung to him. "They're testing us. Probing for weaknesses." His finger traced a line on the map, connecting the red markers in a pattern that made Iris's blood run cold. "They're circling. And when they find what they're looking for, they'll strike." "What are they looking for?" "Vulnerability. Fear. Anything they can exploit." His voice dropped, rough with something that might have been anger or simply weariness. "They know about the cub. Word travels fast among the packs. A feral wolf in the Alpha Zone family? It's exactly the kind of weakness they'd use against us." Iris's chest tightened. Then why keep him alive? Why not? She couldn't finish the thought. "Because he's pack," Verek said, and there was steel beneath the exhaustion now. "Because he's my brother's son, and I don't abandon my own. Even when it would be easier. Even when it would be safer." He turned to look at her, and the weight in his gaze was almost crushing. "Do you understand what that means? The price of that choice." She thought of her own father, of the way he looked at her mother's body without a trace of remorse. "No," she admitted. "My father would have killed him without hesitation." "I know. I've heard the stories about Thaddeus Valen." Verek's expression darkened. "He rules through fear and brutality. It makes him strong in a way. Uncomplicated." He looked back at the maps, at all those red markers creeping closer. "But it also makes him alone. And a wolf alone is a wolf waiting to die." The silence that followed was heavy, intimate in a way that made Iris acutely aware of how close they were standing. She could see the pulse beating in his throat, the way his hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to hit something or hold something, she couldn't tell which. "I saw you with him yesterday," Verek said finally, his voice softer now. "The cub. You were reading to him. Some old human story about a boy and a bear." Iris felt heat creep into her cheeks. He seemed to like it. Or at least, he stopped pacing and sat down to listen. "No one else has managed that. Not the tamers, not even his own uncle." Verek's gaze found hers again, searching. "What is it about you, Iris Valen? What makes you different?" "I don't know," she whispered, the truth of it aching in her chest. "Maybe it's because I understand what it's like to be broken. To have the people who should protect you turn into the ones you need protection from." Verek was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a rumble. "This job, being Alpha, it's not about strength. Not really. It's about carrying burdens that would crush anyone else and pretending they weigh nothing. It's about making choices that will haunt you and living with the consequences." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her jaw, rough and warm. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone truly understands that weight." "I think," Iris said carefully, her heart thundering, "that anyone paying attention can see it. The way you carry yourself. The way you look at your pack." She held his gaze, refusing to flinch away from the intensity there. "You're not as alone as you think." Something shifted in Verek's expression, surprise, maybe, or recognition. For a heartbeat, the space between them felt charged with possibility, with the weight of words unspoken. Then he stepped back, the moment fracturing, and his mask of control slid back into place. "Get back to work," he said, but there was no bite in it. "Those reports won't sort themselves." Iris nodded and turned back to the desk, but she could feel his eyes on her as she worked, could sense the thread that had formed between them, fragile and dangerous and utterly impossible to ignore. Chapter 4. The Alpha didn't ask if she wanted to come. He simply appeared at her cabin door before dawn, already dressed for patrol, and said, "You need to see what we're facing. Get dressed." Iris knew better than to argue. She pulled on the sturdy clothes he'd provided, leather pants, a thick tunic, boots that laced her knees, and followed him into the pre-dawn darkness. 3 other wolves joined them at the compound's edge, their eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. They shifted without ceremony, bones cracking and reforming until 4 massive wolves stood where men had been moments before. Varek remained human, his hand resting on the hilt of a wicked-looking blade at his hip. "Stay close," he told her. "Don't wander. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if I say run, you run." "Understood." She nodded, her mouth too dry for words. They moved through the forest like ghosts, silent and swift. Iris struggled to keep pace, her human legs no match for their supernatural grace, but Varek never left her side. His presence was a constant, solid, protective, a wall between her and whatever lurked in the shadows beyond. The border came into view as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. And then she smelled it. Death. Rot. Something fundamentally wrong that made her stomach heave and her skin crawl with instinctive revulsion. There, one of the wolves growled, his voice distorted by his beast form. He was pointing with his muzzle toward a clearing just ahead. What Iris saw there would haunt her nightmares for weeks to come. 3 bodies, or what remained of them, lay scattered across the forest floor. Wolves, she realized with horror. Young ones, barely more than adolescents. They'd been torn apart with a savagery that went beyond killing, beyond even rage. This was desecration. A message written in blood and viscera. Varek's jaw worked as he surveyed the carnage, his eyes cold and hard as flint. "Rogues," he said quietly. "They crossed into our territory last night. Killed a patrol from the Eastern Pack, left them here for us to find." He crouched beside the nearest body, his fingers brushing the matted fur with unexpected gentleness. They were children. Barely 2 years shifted. Iris's vision swam. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to be sick. Then the forest exploded with movement. They came from everywhere at once, 6 rogues, their fur matted and eyes wild with bloodlust. Varek shifted before Iris could blink, his human form dissolving into something massive and terrifying. His wolf was bigger than the others, silver-black with those burning amber eyes, and when he moved it was with a speed that defied physics. He met the first rogue mid-leap, jaws closing around its throat with brutal efficiency. Blood sprayed across the clearing as he tore sideways, severing spine and windpipe in one savage motion. The second rogue tried to flank him, but Varek was already turning, already anticipating, his claws raking across exposed ribs with enough force to crack bone. It was beautiful and horrible, a dance of violence so precise it bordered on art. This was an alpha at the height of his power, a predator without equal, and Iris couldn't look away even as her heart hammered against her ribs in primal terror. But then she saw it. The moment one of the rogues broke free from the pack and charged straight at her. Varek's roar shook the trees. He launched himself across the clearing, intercepting the rogue mere feet from where Iris stood frozen. They crashed together in a tangle of fur and fury, rolling across the blood-soaked ground. The rogue was fast, desperate, but Varek was relentless. He pinned it beneath his massive paws and drove his fangs into its skull, ending it with cold finality. The remaining rogues scattered, disappearing into the forest with their wounded. Silence fell like a shroud. Varek shifted back slowly, his human form emerging gorse-splattered and breathing hard. He looked at Iris, and for a moment she saw past the alpha, past the mask of control, to something raw and wild beneath. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "Good." He turned away, barking orders to his wolves to track the survivors, to retrieve the bodies of the fallen. But Iris saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled almost imperceptibly before he clenched them into fists. Later, after the dead had been carried home and the patrol disbanded, Iris found him alone at the northern watchtower. He stood at the edge, looking out over the territory he'd sworn to protect, and the weight of it hung around him like a shroud. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly, climbing up to stand beside him. "Risk yourself for me." "Yes, I did." His voice was flat, empty. "You're under my protection." "Is that all I am?" "A responsibility." He didn't answer, and somehow that was answer enough. Iris took a breath, gathering her courage. You're just like him, you know. The cub. When Verek's eyes cut to her, sharp with warning, she didn't back down. You're both so afraid of letting anyone close that you've built walls so high no one can reach you. You tell yourself it's strength, that it's what an alpha does, but really. She moved closer until she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. Really, you're just lonely. And you're terrified that if anyone sees that, they'll think you're weak. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Verek's expression cracked, just for a moment, and she saw the truth beneath, the exhaustion, the isolation, the unbearable weight of leading while always standing apart. You see too much, he said hoarsely. Maybe, Iris whispered. Or maybe I'm just the first person who's bothered to look. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're dangerous, little rabbit. Good, she breathed. So are you. Chapter 5. The package appeared on her cabin doorstep like an offering, a wooden crate filled with clothes that actually fit, soft fabrics in earth tones that didn't smell of wolf or wilderness, but of something cleaner, gentler. Human. There was a note tucked inside, written in Verek's angular script. You needed these. There's coin in the pouch for the town market. Take what you need. Iris ran her fingers over a dove-gray dress, her throat tightening with an emotion she couldn't quite name. When was the last time someone had simply given her something? Not as payment, not as barter, but as a gift with no strings attached? She dressed carefully that morning, braiding her hair and lacing up the new boots that fit perfectly. The wolf who escorted her to town, a taciturn male named Garrett, kept a respectful distance, his presence more guard than jailer. At the forest's edge where the trees gave way to civilization, he stopped. I'll wait here, he said gruffly. You have 2 hours. Don't be late. The town was smaller than Iris remembered, a collection of timber buildings clustered around a central square, market stalls already bustling with morning trade. She moved through the crowds like a ghost, clutching the coin pouch, trying to remember how to be human. How to smile at vendors, how to barter for bread and cheese, how to exist in a world that suddenly felt foreign. A woman bumped into her, apologizing quickly, but Iris caught the way her nose wrinkled. Could she smell the wolves on her? The pine and smoke that had seeped into her skin? The woman hurried away, and Iris felt something crack inside her chest. She didn't belong here. Not anymore. These people with their normal lives and ordinary problems, they looked at her and saw something other. Something tainted. But when she thought of returning to the compound, to the wolves with their predatory stares and pack hierarchies, she knew she didn't fully belong there either. She was caught between worlds, claimed by neither, and the loneliness of it hit her like a physical blow. Iris found herself at the edge of town, near the old well where she'd spent countless nights as a street rat, huddled against the cold. She sat on the stone rim, her carefully chosen purchases forgotten in their basket, and let herself feel the weight of her isolation. Running away already? She jerked up to find Verek standing at the end of the alley, dressed in simple human clothes that somehow made him look even more dangerous. He moved toward her with that predatory grace, his amber eyes reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. How did you? I always know where you are, little rabbit. He sat beside her on the well's edge, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Garrett said you looked lost. I am lost. The admission escaped before she could stop it. I don't belong in the town anymore. I don't belong in your pack. I'm just floating, existing in the spaces between. Verek was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. You think you're the only one who feels that way? Being alpha means existing in that exact same space. Too human for the beast, too beast for the humans. Never fully one or the other. He turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. It's lonely as hell. Then why do it? Why carry that burden alone? Because someone has to. His jaw tightened. Because if I don't, my pack falls apart. People die. And I can't, he stopped, something raw flickering across his face. I won't let that happen. Iris reached out before she could second-guess herself, her hand covering his where it rested on the stone. His skin was warm, calloused, alive. You don't have to carry it alone. Not anymore. Verek's fingers curled around hers, grip almost desperate. You don't know what you're saying. What you're offering. Yes, I do. She shifted closer until she could feel the heat radiating from him, could count the shades of gold in his eyes. I'm saying I see you, Werek. Not the Alpha. Not the monster everyone fears. Just you. And you don't scare me. I should, he said roughly, but his free hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. You should run from me as far and fast as you can. I'm done running. Her voice was barely a whisper now, their faces inches apart. I think I was always meant to end up here. With you. The words hung between them, fragile and impossibly true. Then Werek made a sound half growl, half surrender, and closed the distance. His kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative but consuming, desperate, like a drowning man finally breaking the surface. His hand tangled in her hair, angling her head as he deepened the kiss, and Iris melted into him with a soft sound that was part relief, part revelation. This was what it felt like to be claimed. Not as property, not as obligation, but as something chosen. Something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Werek rested his forehead against hers. This is dangerous, he murmured against her lips. For both of us. I know. Iris smiled, her hands fisting in his shirt. Do it anyway. His answering smile was fierce, almost wild. You're going to destroy me, aren't you? Probably. She kissed him again, softer this time. But you'll destroy me right back. So I think we're even. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine, that Iris felt her heart crack open completely. For the first time since her mother's death, since she'd fled her father's territory, since she'd stumbled across that border into Blood Moon, she felt something that might have been hope. Maybe she didn't belong anywhere yet. But here, in this moment, wrapped in Verek's arms with the sound of his heartbeat steady against her ear, she thought maybe she was starting to find home. Chapter 6. The pack gathering should have been routine monthly reports, territory updates, the usual litany of alpha business conducted in the Great Hall with its soaring timber beams and stone hearth large enough to roast a bear. Iris stood at the back, trying to make herself invisible among the shadows, but she felt every eye that slid toward her. Curious. Assessing. Hostile. Werek commanded the center of the room like he'd been carved from the mountain itself, his voice carrying absolute authority as he outlined patrol rotations and discussed the latest rogue sightings. Beside him, Serafina stood with her chin lifted, every inch the perfect mate, beautiful, powerful, packborn. Everything Iris wasn't. And the human? Serafina's voice cut through Verek's words like a blade through silk. How long does she stay under your protection, Alpha? The room went still. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Verek's amber eyes narrowed, but before he could speak, a male wolf stepped forward from the crowd. Reese, one of Verek's lieutenants, all brutal strength and pack politics. It's a fair question, he said, his tone deceptively reasonable. 3 weeks she's been here. Living in pack territory, eating pack resources, and for what? A feral cub who's barely shown improvement. The cub is calmer, Werek said, each word edged with warning. He eats. He sleeps. He hasn't attacked anyone since she arrived. Baseline stability. Reese spread his hands in mock concession. But nothing that justifies keeping a human in our midst. Especially one who, forgive my bluntness, Alpha, you seem increasingly distracted by. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Iris's face burned, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep her breathing even. This was pack business. She had no right to interfere. My judgment, Werek said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that preceded violence, is not your concern. It is when it affects pack security. Serafina moved closer to Varek, her hand resting possessively on his arm. You've taken this girl under your protection. Given her resources, attention, access to pack territory. And what do we know about her? That she's Thaddeus Valen's daughter, a man who'd gut his own wolves for sport. That she ran from her pack like a coward. That she has some unexplained ability with the cub that reeks of manipulation or worse. Her ice blue eyes found Iris across the room. What if she's a spy? What if her father sent her here to exploit your one weakness? Enough. The word cracked like thunder, but Serafina pressed on. She's made you soft, Varek. Everyone sees it. You risk yourself protecting her, spend hours in her company, defend her against pack members with legitimate concerns. You're compromised. And a compromised alpha is a dead alpha. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Iris saw the calculation in the watching wolves' eyes, the way they measured Varek's response, testing for weakness. Her presence here had painted a target on his back, and they all knew it. Varek's hand shot out, gripping Serafina's wrist with enough force to make her wince. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute dominion, not the man but the alpha in full, terrible command. You question my judgment? My strength. He released Serafina and turned to face the entire room, his gaze sweeping over every wolf present. Iris Valen stays. Under my protection, by my authority. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me directly. Right here. Right now. The silence was deafening. No, Varek's smile was all teeth. Then this discussion is over. She's earned her place twice over, and if you're too blind to see that, it's not my problem. His eyes found Iris's across the room, molten gold and fierce. She's pack. And I protect what's mine. Chapter 7. The attack came at midnight, when the compound was quietest and the sentries at their most vulnerable. Iris woke to the sound of howling, not the usual pack communication, but something twisted, feral wrong. She bolted from her cabin as the first screams split the night. Fire bloomed across the compound's eastern edge, where the rogues had breached the fence. Dark shapes poured through the gap like a flood of shadow and rage, their eyes reflecting red in the flames. 30, maybe 40 of them, more than anyone had expected. More than should have been possible. Varek was already shifted, his massive silver-black form tearing through the attackers with brutal efficiency. But even as Iris watched, she saw what the others couldn't. The rogues weren't fighting to win. They were driving him north, away from the den, away from reinforcements. Separating the alpha from his pack. Terror crystallized in her chest. This wasn't random violence. This was strategy. She ran toward the cub's enclosure, her lungs burning. If they wanted the cub, they'd have to go through her first. But when she reached the clearing, she found it already under siege. For rogues circled the reinforced fence while inside. The cub threw himself against the barriers with frantic desperation, his eyes wild with renewed trauma. Get away from him. Iris didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fallen branch, pathetic against wolves, and charged forward. One of the rogues turned, its scarred muzzle pulling back in what might have been a laugh. Then it lunged. The impact never came. A silver-gray blur crashed into the rogue mid-leap, and Iris's heart seized as she recognized the cub. He'd somehow broken through the weakened section of fence, and now he stood between her and the attackers, his small body trembling, but his stance protective. No, she whispered, watching him face down wolves twice his size. Please no. But the cub didn't retreat. When the rogues advanced, he met them with a ferocity that belied his youth, his jaws snapping with precision born of pure instinct. He couldn't win, she knew that, but he was buying her time. A roar split the night, and Varek appeared at the clearing's edge, bloodied and limping but alive. Relief flooded through Iris for exactly 3 seconds before she saw what followed him. The rogue alpha was massive, bigger even than Varek, with fur like dirty ice and eyes that held nothing but hunger. It moved with the confidence of a creature that had never known defeat, and when it spoke, its voice was grinding stone and cruelty. You've grown weak, bloods now. Protecting humans. Coddling broken cubs. It circled Varek slowly, savoring the moment. Your pack will fall. And I'll enjoy tearing out your throat while they watch. They clashed in an explosion of violence. Even injured, Varek fought like the legend he was, but the rogue Alpha was fresh, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Within seconds, Varek was pinned, the rogue Alpha's jaws closing around his throat. Something broke inside Iris, not fear, but clarity. She looked at the cub, still fighting, still protecting despite everything he'd lost. Looked at Varek, who'd given her sanctuary when he had every reason to turn her away. Looked at the life she'd found here, fragile and impossible and worth everything. Stop. Her voice cut through the chaos with unexpected power. The rogue Alpha's head turned toward her, eyes narrowing. The pet speaks. You want him. Iris gestured to the cub, her heart shattering even as she said it. Take him. Just let Varek go. No. Varek's strangled shout was agonized. Iris, don't. But she was already moving toward the cub, her hands outstretched in what looked like surrender. The rogue Alpha's grip loosened slightly, curiosity overriding caution. That moment of distraction was all Varek needed. He twisted free, his claws raking across the rogue Alpha's exposed throat with savage precision. The creature stumbled back, shock registering in its eyes as blood poured from the wound. Varek didn't hesitate, he struck again, and this time it was final. The remaining rogues scattered as their Alpha fell. The cub collapsed against Iris, whimpering, and she gathered him close as the compound erupted in victorious howls. But her eyes found Varek across the blood-soaked clearing, and what passed between them needed no words. She'd chosen him. Chosen them. And there was no going back. Chapter 8. The compound smoldered as dawn broke, smoke still rising from the breached eastern fence, where bodies were being cleared and wounds tended. Iris moved through it like a ghost, the cub's weight warm against her side where he refused to leave her. Her dress was torn, blood spattered from wounds that weren't hers, and exhaustion pulled at her bones with leaden insistence. She barely registered Varek's approach until his hand closed around her arm, gentle despite the urgency in his grip. He was still in human form, covered in drying blood and ash, a gash across his ribs that made her breath catch. But his eyes were clear, focused entirely on her. Come with me, he said, low enough that only she could hear. He led her through the chaos, past wolves who parted with knowing looks, through corridors of the main den she'd never seen before. The cub trotted behind them, his presence a small comfort as Varek pushed open a heavy door and guided her into his private chambers. The room was surprisingly sparse for an Alpha, stone walls, a massive bed draped in dark furs, weapons mounted with brutal efficiency. A fireplace dominated one wall, already lit and casting dancing shadows across everything. It smelled of him, pine and smoke, and something wild that made her pulse quicken. Varek closed the door and stood there for a moment, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. When he finally turned, something in his expression made her heart stutter. What you did tonight, his voice cracked, and he stopped, jaw working. Offering yourself. The cub. Trying to save me by. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence still fresh on his skin. Don't you ever do that again. Do you understand me? Don't you dare sacrifice yourself for me. I had to, Iris whispered, her own hands coming up to grip his wrists. I couldn't watch you die. Not when the words stuck in her throat, too big, too terrifying to speak aloud. When you what? His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, amber eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. Say it, little rabbit. I need to hear you say it. When I love you. The confession tore free, raw and unguarded. I love you, and I don't care if it's too soon or too impossible or too. His kiss swallowed the rest of her words, fierce and claiming and achingly tender all at once. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, their breathing ragged in the quiet. "I need you," he said hoarsely. "Not as a responsibility. Not as someone to protect. I need you beside me. As my equal. My Luna." Iris's breath caught. Luna. The Alpha's true mate, his partner in all things. Not Serafina with her perfect bloodline and political advantages, but her a broken street rat who'd stumbled across his border half-dead and desperate. "The pack," she started, but he cut her off. "The pack will accept what I tell them to accept. Tonight you proved yourself 10 times over. You protected the cub. You gave me the opening I needed to finish that bastard. You chose us." His hands slid down to grip her shoulders. "Now let me choose you. Properly. Permanently." "Yes." The word escaped before fear could strangle it. "Yes, I'll be your Luna. I'll stand beside you. I'll." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. When they parted, he pressed something into her palm, a ring carved from dark wood, etched with symbols she recognized as pack marks. Old magic, binding magic. "Tomorrow we make it official," he murmured against her lips. "Tonight, you're already mine. And I'm already yours." The cub made a soft sound from where he'd curled up by the fire, and Iris laughed, actually laughed, at the absurdity of it all. A month ago she'd been dying in the snow. Now she was here, wrapped in an Alpha's arms, with a future she'd never dared imagine stretching before her. "I'm yours," she whispered back, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones like coming home. Chapter 9. The ceremony takes place under a full moon, the compound transformed with torches that cast dancing shadows across snow-dusted ground. Iris stands at the center of it all, wearing a dress the color of winter dawn, silver threading through gray fabric that catches the firelight like frost. The cub presses against her leg, no longer feral but still protective, and she draws strength from his solid warmth. Every wolf in Blood Moon has gathered. She feels the weight of their stares, some curious, some skeptical, a few openly hostile. Serafina stands near the back, her ice blue eyes cold with barely contained fury. But Iris doesn't look away. She's done shrinking from judgment. Werewolf emerges from the den in full Alpha regalia, black furs across his shoulders, ceremonial markings painted across his bare chest in ash and ochre. He moves through the crowd like winter itself, commanding and inevitable, and when his amber eyes find hers, everything else falls away. "Iris Valen," his voice carries across the silent gathering, "you came to us broken. Running. Carrying wounds that should have killed you." He stops before her, close enough that she can see the gold flecks in his eyes, the slight curve of his mouth that's only for her. "You could have stayed broken. Could have let those wounds define you. Instead, you chose to heal. To fight. To stand when anyone else would have fallen." He reaches for her hand, and she gives it without hesitation. His fingers are warm, calloused, steady. "You calmed what couldn't be calmed. Protected what needed protecting. You saw past the monster everyone fears and found the man beneath." His thumb brushes across her knuckles, an intimate gesture that makes her breath catch. "Tonight, I claim you before the pack. Not as a guest. Not as someone under my protection. But as my Luna. My equal. My mate." The words should terrify her, this permanent claiming, this public binding. But all she feels is relief. Like something that's been untethered her entire life has finally found anchor. "Do you accept?" Werewolf asks, and there's vulnerability beneath the ceremony now. Real fear that she might still refuse, still choose to run. Iris thinks of the girl who crawled through snow 3 months ago, bleeding and desperate. Thinks of the beast she whispered to in a frozen ravine, seeing his emptiness because it mirrored her own. Thinks of every moment since, the late-night sorting reports, the quiet conversations, the kiss that changed everything. "I do," she says, and her voice doesn't waver. "I accept." Werewolf's smile is fierce, almost wild. He pulls her close and kisses her in front of the entire pack, claiming, possessive, utterly devoted. When they break apart, he turns her to face the wolves, his arms solid around her waist. "You're Luna," he announces, and the authority in his voice brooks no argument. "Anyone who challenges her challenges me." The silence stretches for one heartbeat. 2. Then a wolf near the front drops to one knee. Another follows. Within seconds, the entire pack kneels except for Seraphina, who stands frozen with barely leashed rage before finally, grudgingly, lowering herself as well. Iris's throat tightens with emotion she can't name. Acceptance. Belonging. Home. That night, after the celebration winds down and the compound quiets, she stands with Varek on the northern watchtower. The cub sleeps peacefully in the den below, finally at peace. The territory stretches before them, vast and beautiful and theirs to protect. "What are you thinking?" Varek asks, pulling her against his chest. Iris looks out at the moonlit forest and thinks of a single word whispered to a beast in a ravine. Empty. She'd been so certain they were the same, two broken creatures recognizing their shared wounds. But she'd been wrong. They weren't empty. They were waiting. Waiting for someone brave enough to look past the teeth and claws and fury to see what lay beneath. "I'm thinking," she says softly, "that being seen is the most powerful magic there is." Varek's arms tighten around her, and she feels his smile against her hair. "Then I see you, little rabbit. Every part. And I choose you. Always."